In the days when kings trembled and prophets fell silent, a sign appeared in the heavens. A woman, clothed with the sun, the moon beneath her feet, a crown of 12 stars upon her brow. She was not born of royalty, nor raised in splendor. She came forth from ashes, from a ruined village by the hills of silence. Her cry was heard before she breathed. Her name, unknown to men, was spoken by angels. It is said that the night she was born, the stars aligned, and the sky wept flame. Birds did not sing, trees did not sway. Even the wind knelt down to listen. She opened her eyes, and the old priests whispered, "The hour draws near." People came from far lands just to glimpse her face, not because she was beautiful, but because her gaze unsettled the proud and comforted the broken. They crowned her a miracle. They called her the Anointed. But fame is a false altar, and praise a dangerous oil. One morning, she vanished. No trail, no farewell, only silence. And on the gate of the holy city, her robe was found scorched by fire, hanging like a banner of judgment. Many feared she had perished, but those who watched the heavens saw a second sign, a dragon red as blood waiting to devour. And they knew the woman was not lost. She was hidden until the appointed time. Now, that time has come. Before we follow her footsteps into exile and revelation, take a moment to honor this story like if it stirs something within you. Subscribe and walk with us into the holy shadows where truth is hidden. For the face that once lit the heavens is about to be seen again, and this is where her story begins. In the 7th year of drought, when the temple doors creaked with rust and the eyes of prophets turned to stone, a child was born beneath a crimson sky. Her mother labored alone in a crumbled hut beyond the valley of ashes where even the jackals would not howl. They called the place Dust Without Mercy. And yet from this ruin she emerged. The child did not scream. She opened her eyes and watched the stars. The midwife fell to her knees. The animals in the hills fell silent. And above the ruined city, the clouds parted into a single eye of flame. Old men with cracked lips whispered, a sign from the Most High. Her skin bore the sheen of bronze not forged by men. Her breath slow measured, as if she remembered a world before this one. They wrapped her in a cloth stitched with ancient symbols, sunbursts, crescents, tongues of fire. Not by human hands, the old women said. This was the robe of the Anointed. When the child was presented at the edge of the sanctuary ruins, an elder dropped his staff. Another tore his mantle. The priestess wept without sound. She is the one who walks between the veils, they murmured, the face seen in heaven. From that day, no one dared name her. To name is to possess. To possess is to limit. She remained the girl, but some called her flame in waiting, others the whisper before thunder. At age 4, she sang in a voice not her own. At 5, she traced glowing circles in the air. By 6, she stared into mirrors until water formed at her feet. She had no playmates, only shadows and silence and scripture. The villagers brought her offerings, bread oil, crushed myrrh, not in worship, but in fear. For when she passed, birds stilled in midair, dogs lay prostrate, fire bent toward her. By her 9th year, the girl no longer spoke, not from shyness nor wound, but reverence. She listened, to wind, to dust, to the silence that came before prophecy. And what she heard she carried like a sealed scroll within her chest. They gave her a place in the sanctuary of echoes, where the stones still remembered the ark, where voices of priests lingered in the walls. There she drew symbols on cold pillars, each mark pulsating with faint light before fading like breath on glass. Pilgrims traveled for weeks just to see her sit. Some left cured of affliction, others left weeping without knowing why. She is the mirror of what we forgot one blind man said, and the dream we fear to remember. Then came the eclipse. It was neither foretold nor expected. The watchers on the tower saw no signs, no comets, no tremors, no cry from the beasts. Just a hush, a stillness that crept across the valley like death in linen. The sun dimmed slowly, reverently, as though bowing before something greater. The birds ceased their flight mid-wing. Shepherds wept without knowing why. And from the highest peak of the hills a trumpet sounded, but no lips were seen. That day she vanished. No gate was broken. No footprints marked the dust. Only the cloth, her cloth folded neatly on the stone altar, still warm with the memory of touch. The people gathered in silence. Children asked where she had gone. The elders gave no answer. Some claimed she had returned to the heavens. Others feared she had been taken by the shadowed ones, those that dwell between light and name. But a few, the oldest and most broken, knew better. They remembered the ancient scroll, the one that spoke of the woman clothed in the sun, and the time when she would be hidden for 1,260 days. She is not gone, they whispered, but sealed. All throughout the land, signs unfolded. The rivers ran backward for a night. The fig trees bore black fruit. A child in the market spoke in voices three at once. Fear gripped the cities, but not just fear, anticipation. Something was awakening. And then the dream began to spread. The same dream. From soldier to shepherd, widow to prince, they all dreamed of a wilderness. A woman with stars in her hair, a child born under a crimson sky, and a voice that thundered without sound. The dragon stirs, the womb of light prepares. In the dream she wept, not for herself but for what must come. The priest declared fasts, the scribes uncovered forbidden books. Some wept, some cursed, all waited. In a cavern deep beneath the old altar, a hermit awoke from 30 years of silence. He emerged, eyes like polished stone, and said, "She walks among the shadows now, but her steps shake the heavens." Those who once feared her now longed for her return. They painted her face in sacred ink. They sang her silence in psalms, and in the stillness of twilight they listened. For the wind, for the whisper, for the voice of the one who bore the sign. And though she had vanished, the world would never be the same. Because the face, seen in heaven, the one born beneath the ash moon, the child who did not cry, had entered the wilderness, and prophecy had begun to stir. The dream came first to the shepherd. He was a man of cracked feet and silent prayer, dwelling near the salt hills where no olive grew. One night, as the stars refused to move, he saw her, clothed in flame, eyes like burning rivers, a child within her arms, glowing, weeping, crowned. She stood upon the void above a serpent of 7 heads, and behind her a great wind stirred the scrolls of heaven. The shepherd awoke screaming, not in terror, but in awe. By sunrise, his dream had passed to a merchant, then to a girl child in a fisher's hut. And within 3 days, the dream had circled the land like a chariot of fire. They called it the shared vision. The priests gathered in the desolate court, their faces pale with dust and warning. "It has begun," said the high scribe. The vision sealed in the book of days. They opened the scroll of Isaiah, reading by firelight the forbidden lines. "Therefore, the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and the land shall be forsaken of both her kings." The girl in the vision, they knew her face. It was the face seen in heaven, and the child in her arms. None dared name him, but all felt the pull. The heavens grew restless. Stars wandered from their stations. The moon turned bronze for 7 nights, and men spoke in tongues not heard since the tower. In the temple of embers, an old woman opened her mouth after decades of muteness. "The fire is coming," she whispered, "but only those marked will endure it." The people began to fast, not for mercy, but for meaning. They sang the songs of the waiting lighting lamps in every window, laying linen on rooftops. And in the silence between prayers, they listened for the voice. One boy, only 10 years of age, spoke in a voice not his own. She dreams not for herself, she dreams for the world, and the world shall shake for what she must birth. A hush fell over the city. Even the wind bowed low. In a forgotten corner of the highlands, a widow awoke from a dream she did not seek. She had not spoken in years, not since the night her sons vanished beneath the storm. But that morning she rose, washed her feet in ash, and whispered only this: "She is near." Across the lands others began to stir, farmers, slaves, scholars, madmen, each with the same fire behind their eyes. The dream now moved like breath through a temple curtain. Not just vision, but summons. They saw her again, the woman with stars braided into her hair. She stood in a place between waking and sleep, surrounded by 12 burning trees. And from her lips came no words, only the sound of thunder wrapped in stillness. Then the child in her arms opened his mouth, and the earth trembled. A priest in the southern watch claimed the ground beneath him cracked. In the northern province, 3 wells turned to wine. And a deaf man heard for the first time, but not voices, only a name he could not forget. The scribes called it the unveiling, not of war, not of judgment, but of purpose. The dream was not a warning, it was a promise, that what had been hidden was beginning to move. Among the elders, fear grew, not of chaos, but of change. For if the woman returned, what would she demand? And what must die for her to speak? In hidden chambers, scrolls long sealed were read aloud. Each line pulsed with strange warmth, as if the parchment knew she listened. In one, the prophecy was plain, and the woman fled into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. She had not vanished, she had been kept, preserved in mystery, guarded by silence, carried by fire. And now the fire returned. In dreams, in whispers, in trembling soil. And through it all the people waited, for the one who bore the light, for the face seen in heaven, for the woman clothed with the sun. She was not made to be seen, yet the world could not look away. From the moment her silence was broken by vision, faces turned toward her like sunflowers to dawn. They came in robes and rags from cities of stone and tents of goat hair. Men who ruled nations, women who nursed the dying, children whose dreams ran ahead of their tongues, all gathered not to hear but to behold. For her presence unsettled the proud and quieted the grieving. No words were needed. Her silence was a mirror, and what it revealed was unbearable to some and healing to others. Some claimed her gaze restored sight. Others said she spoke without sound. But those who stood nearest her swore they heard their own souls speak back. A man with no tongue wept for 3 days. A murderer buried his blade. A queen disrobed and laid her jewels at the temple gate. But fame is a fire, and the fire soon consumes. The elders, once protectors, began to fear the crowds more than they feared the void. Her face, they whispered, has become the altar. They built a wall of protocol surrounding her with chants and curtained scrolls and servants. What began in wonder slipped into spectacle. She no longer walked the garden. She sat beneath gilded lamps, watched by eyes that demanded blessing or marvel or tears. And slowly the girl faded, not in body, but in soul. She who once sang with flames now spoke rehearsed phrases. She who danced with wind now moved only when summoned. And within her a great ache grew, the ache of being seen but never known. At night she returned to her dreams. But the dreams no longer comforted. They warned. In them she stood atop a tower of mirrors. Each reflection showed a face of her as the world wanted her saint, savior, witch, weapon. Each one beckoned, each one lied. She cried out to the heavens, "Who am I beneath these veils?" And the answer came not as thunder, but as stillness. The same stillness from the day she was born. And in that stillness, she remembered the first fire, the first breath, the voice that said, "Not what they see, but what I see." She awoke with tear-wet cheeks, and for the first time in years, she smiled. She withdrew, not by command, but by calling. One morning, as the city bells echoed off Stone and Pride, she walked past the outer gate, past the olive groves, past the final pillar where men still knelt to her shadow. No servant followed. No farewell was spoken, only silence and the gentle sound of sandals on dust. The wilderness received her not as a queen, but as a daughter returned. The wind did not question. The rocks did not demand. Only the sky watched, and even it held its breath. She walked for 7 days. On the 8th, she found a cave. Within it she sat. She ate roots. She drank dew. She wept without shame. And she listened. Not to the world, but to the ache within. It was there, in that cave carved by forgotten waters, that the voice returned. Not thunder, not song, but stillness with weight. You are not what they crowned. You are what I kept. She fell prostrate. Her tears soaked the stone. She no longer asked for answers, only presence. And presence came, in the form of dreams once buried, in the heat behind her ribs, in the knowing that no name was needed to be known. In the darkness, a light burned without flame. And from that light, she saw, not visions of conquest, not judgment or glory, but a cradle, a manger of stars. And in it, a child, the same from her earliest dreams, the same whose cry had once stilled the heavens. She reached for him, and he opened his eyes. Eyes like hers, eyes like the first dawn. Then the vision faded, but the warmth remained, and she knew. Her exile was not punishment, it was preparation. Her silence was not retreat, it was sanctification. And though the world had seen her face, it had never seen her purpose. Not yet. Outside the cave a wind rose, and with it a voice rode upon the breeze. The time is near. The dragon moves. The womb of light must open. She stood, wrapped herself in the cloth of stars once left behind, and stepped into the night. She returned as quietly as she had vanished. Not to the city, but to the borderlands where stone met sand, and winds carried the sighs of exiled prophets. Word spread not by messengers, but by dreams. A merchant dreamed of a flame walking on water. A widow saw a hand lift dust into stars. A child woke, crying the words, "She has come. She has come." They found her seated by a well that held no water. Her hands bore no scepter. Her feet still calloused from wilderness, but her gaze carried thunder. And those who approached found they could not speak, not from fear, but from awe. For she did not preach, she listened. And in the stillness, truth unraveled. A soldier confessed to ghosts he had buried. A priest admitted he no longer believed in fire. A young woman declared she had named her unborn son Promise. All spoke, all wept. She said little. But when she raised her hand, even the crows ceased their noise. No doctrine, no law, only presence. And presence judged more deeply than words. The elders, hearing of her reappearance, sent scribes to question her. "By what power do you do this?" they asked. "Who taught you these ways? What scrolls do you follow?" She answered with silence. And then with a whisper, "The scroll is written within me." They returned in confusion. "She is dangerous," one muttered. "She is unteachable," said another. But one, the youngest scribe, knelt in the dust and whispered, "She is the scroll." And the people kept coming, not in thousands, but in streams like veins returning to a heart. And in every gathering, she asked one question: "What is your hunger?" Not what do you want, not what do you lack, but hunger. And those who answered with honesty left changed, because hunger revealed the soul, and hers had been emptied only to be filled with light. But not all were stirred by light. In the city of high walls and broken altars, where the gold still gleamed, but the priests no longer prayed, a murmur rose. A murmur of fear. A fear not of swords, but of symbols. "She undermines the order," they said. "She teaches without scroll or sanction. She listens and the people follow. The council met in shadowed chambers, the air thick with incense and dread. "She must be silenced," said the high voice, "for silence is where she rules." "But how do you silence the wind?" They sent a messenger cloaked in authority. He found her near the well, surrounded by olive trees and those who hungered. He stepped forward. She met his gaze. He spoke with practiced command. "You are to cease. You are to return. You are to submit." She said nothing, but her silence cracked something in him. He trembled, then whispered unbidden, "Are you the one?" She replied only, "I am what was promised, not what was expected." And the people wept. The messenger fled. Back in the council halls, fear bloomed like mold in sealed places. "She must be discredited," said one, "exposed as false." They summoned scholars to dissect her silence. They hired poets to outshine her voice. They sent spies to learn her origin. But origin cannot explain the eternal. They found no birth record, no lineage, only the name written in the dreams of children, she who burns without consuming. In desperation, they twisted her image. "She corrupts with peace," they cried. "She deceives with gentleness." But still they came, not to her name, but to the presence. One night, as the stars flickered like breath, she stood before the people and said, "The dragon has stirred." They did not understand, but they felt it, a tightening in the wind, a tremor in the soul. And in that hour, the sky cracked. From the east, a storm unlike any other gathered, and in its belly, shadows moved. The dragon had indeed awakened, and she, the woman once clothed in flame, stepped forward, not with army, not with sword, but with eyes wide open and a womb of light. The storm did not arrive as rain. It arrived as silence, a silence so thick it swallowed breath. Birdsong ceased, torches flickered blue, and then the ground sighed, not shook, not split, but sighed as though the very earth wearied of its secrets. Out from the east came riders, not men but shapes, figures like smoke wrapped in armor, eyes glowing amber. Behind them a banner with no sigil, only fire, and the sound not of hooves but of heartbeat. The people trembled, but she stood, her feet planted, her gaze unmoved. For she knew this moment, had seen it in her dreams when she was still a child, cradled in light. The lead rider dismounted. No face beneath the helm, only flame. He spoke no word, but his presence screamed. She stepped forward, robes trailing light, and whispered, "Do you come to devour?" The flame hissed, a voice echoed within it. "We come to test." She did not flinch. "I have already been tested, by night, by hunger, by silence." The flame surged. The figure raised a hand, and the crowd fell to the ground, not slain, but stunned by awe. Only she remained standing. "Who protects you?" it asked. She pointed not upward, but inward. "What you fear," she said, "is not me, but what I carry." The figure stepped back. The fire dimmed, then roared. "You speak as if you bear authority." "I bear life," she answered. And at that, the wind rose. It circled her, lifting her hair, rippling her garment like prophecy. And then she spoke not with her own voice, but with one deeper than time. "The dragon is not your master. The fire does not belong to you." At those words, the rider stumbled. Smoke spilled from the helm. The banner ignited, and one by one the shapes vanished into wind. When all was still, she turned to the people, not triumphant, not proud, but resolute, and said, "Prepare, not for war, but for birth." The days that followed were heavy, not with fear, but with anticipation. The people did not scatter, they gathered. Around wells, on rooftops, beneath fig trees whose leaves now turned gold overnight. They lit lamps not for protection, but for witness. For something was coming, not from above, but from within. She no longer walked among them, she rested. In a chamber carved of clay and starlight, her hands on her belly, her breath a rhythm older than song. Those who watched did not speak. Not even the wind dared interrupt, for they sensed it. This was not the birth of a child. It was the birth of a word wrapped in flesh, a promise clothed in pain. Her body, once radiant and strong, now trembled, not from weakness, from weight. The weight of time, of all that had come before, of all that must come after. She dreamed in fragments, a garden without gate, a tree whose leaves bled light, a lamb asleep in the mouth of a lion, and a voice always the same. You will not die in labor, but the world may. Outside the skies darkened, birds flew lower, sheep birthed twins without blemish. The rivers ran slower as if to bow, and the people they sang, not hymns of old, but new songs born of silence, shaped by hunger. They sang to the waiting, to the ache, to the unseen pain of bearing purpose. And within the chamber she wept, not from agony, but from knowing. This was not her gift, it was the world's. She would carry it, but she could not keep it. And as the final night fell, she whispered to the stars, "Let it come." The night unfolded like a scroll. Clouds drifted low, veiling the stars. The moon withdrew its face, leaving only shadow and breath. And in that breath it began. She lay upon linen soaked in oil and myrrh. Candles ringed the room, 12 flames each flickering as if in prayer. No midwife stood beside her, no healer, only the presence. The one who first called her forth. The one who wrote her name in silence. The pain came in waves. But they were not like those of women. These were ancient. These were echoes of creation. With each contraction, the stones beneath her hummed. The air thickened. Even time seemed to pause, waiting. Outside, the people knelt, not from command, but from knowing. A shepherd began to sing, low, steady, a song without words. One by one they joined, until the desert itself trembled with sound. And still she labored, not with screams, but with breath. Steady, holy, each inhale a prayer, each exhale a surrender. And then a cry, but not hers. A cry that split the veil between worlds. A cry that made the wolves pause and the fire bow. The child had come, wrapped in light, eyes shut, heart thunderous. But this was no ordinary birth. For when the child opened his mouth, the candle flames turned blue. The stars aligned, and a whisper rolled across the heaven. Behold the Word made flesh. She held him, not with possession, but with awe, for she knew he was not hers to keep. He was the beginning wrapped in softness, the end swaddled in skin. She wept, and her tears fell upon his brow like oil. The child did not cry again. He breathed slow, sure as though every breath shaped galaxies. And with each breath, the earth responded. Mountains exhaled, seas stilled, the wind wept. Above the chamber, stars rearranged themselves. A new constellation emerged, 12 points surrounding one central flame. The old scribes would later call it the crown of witness. But in that moment, the people simply looked upward and fell silent. The priests watching from afar tore their garments. Not in mourning, but in revelation. He is not ours, one whispered. He is beyond us, said another. And the elders, those who once feared her, now covered their faces, for they had seen what could not be unseen. The woman, now mother, looked down at the child, and in his eyes she saw all things. The rise and fall of empires, the breaking of seals, the return of rivers to dry lands. And one image lingered, a tree rooted in fire, yet blooming with fruit of crystal. A voice came not from the child, but through him. The time is sealed, the veil will thin. The dragon watches. She did not tremble. She nodded. Then, wrapping the child in the cloth of stars, she rose. The people opened a path, not out of duty, but reverence. And as she passed, no one spoke. Only the wind, which whispered, "She is the vessel. He is the flame. And the story has only begun." She fled, not from fear but from foresight. For even as the stars bore witness, shadows stirred. The dragon had seen, and the dragon would not sleep again. So she moved, into the hills through forests not yet mapped beyond the rivers where no names held sway. She cradled the child beneath her robe of stars, wrapped him in psalms whispered between footfalls. He did not wail, he did not stir. Only his breath reminded her life still pulsed within flesh. And behind them, darkness followed. Not men, not beasts, but something more ancient. The dragon walked in rumor. Villages burned without flame. Wells turned to dust, and children stopped dreaming. The signs were clear, so she pressed on faster now. Each night, she slept with one eye open, one hand on his heart. And each morning, new wonders awaited. Once she awoke to find manna upon stone. Another time, a lion bowed as she passed. And once, at the edge of thirst, a spring erupted from barren rock. She sang no lullabies, only scripture, verses of wilderness, of deliverance, of fire that does not consume. And the child listened. Even in sleep he listened, for he too remembered, not with mind, but with marrow. One evening, as the moon bled red, she saw them, figures in the distance, cloaked, still. At first, she feared, but then they knelt. And one spoke, "We have waited." They were the remnant, keepers of old flame, guardians of prophecy. Those who remembered when remembering was forbidden. They took her in, gave her bread, shelter, and silence. And there, in caves carved by song, she rested. But only for a moment, for rest was not her destiny. Within the refuge of stone and shadow, the child grew, not like others. He did not cry for food. He did not fear the dark. He watched, he listened, he remembered. At times he would reach toward unseen things. Whispers, flickers, winds that obeyed no season. The remnant marveled. They called him the ember, the quiet flame, the promise. But she called him only beloved. She fed him from her hand, bathed him in rivers that whispered prophecy, wrapped him each night in the cloth of stars. And every dawn she prayed, "Keep him hidden until the appointed fire." The remnant taught her much. Scrolls buried for generations were read aloud again. Songs once outlawed were sung in open caves, and by the light of sacred oil they traced signs on stone, symbols of hope, warnings of betrayal, maps of stars yet to rise. And always the dragon stirred. It could not see him, but it sensed. It burned forests in vain, choked streams in wrath, raised voices against her whispers that she was false, a thief of wonder. Still she endured. She did not answer slander with defense, but with silence. And in that silence the child thrived. He walked by age 3. He spoke by 4, not in full speech, but in verse. Lines that no one had taught him. Lines from scrolls thought lost. A rod shall rise from the root. He shall not judge by what he sees. The Lamb shall lead. And when he spoke, stars flickered. The oil lamps stilled. And the remnant wept. For they knew he was not becoming. He was remembering. The child was 7 when the light first changed. It came not from sun, but from within him. A glow beneath the skin. A shimmer in the breath. A gravity in his silence. And the remnant trembled, for they had seen signs, but never this. One evening he stood before the sacred wall, the one etched with fire symbols none could read. He raised his hand. The symbols burned anew, each one igniting an order like stars awakening in a forgotten sky. Then he spoke. The time of hiding ends. She wept, not from fear, from knowing. It was soon. That night, the remnant gathered. Torches lined the path. The elders dressed in sackcloth and blue ash. They asked no questions. They made no plans. Only one act remained. They anointed him. Oil on brow, ash on heart, star cloth over shoulders. And as they sang, he turned to her. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. She knelt, kissed his hand, and whispered, "Always," until the last flame. At dawn they descended the hills, not in parade, but in pilgrimage. The people below saw them a woman radiant with weariness and a boy whose eyes held galaxies. And many remembered. The dreams, the signs, the silence. And they followed. First dozens, then hundreds. Not all believed, not all bowed, but all watched. And as they walked, a wind rose behind them, carrying dust and destiny. From the east the dragon stirred again, not in shape, but in influence. Laws were passed, scrolls were burned, names were erased. And above all, one command: find the child. But none could. For the more they searched, the more the wind misled them. And the boy walked in plain sight, yet unseen by those who sought him with hatred. The first miracle came without warning. They had reached the plain of shards, a place where nothing grew, where salt cracked the earth like old bones. The people were hungry, the water gone. She knelt beside him, laid her hands upon the dust, closed her eyes. And he whispered, just once, a word no one could hear but all felt. The ground shivered, a tremor not of fear but of remembrance. And then it bloomed. From cracks, long-dead green shoots burst forth, flowers unknown to scholars, fruits that dripped light. The crowd gasped, some laughed, others fell face down in worship. But he simply walked on, as though this was not wonder but rhythm. The story spread faster than wind. Villages emptied, rulers trembled, the dragon raged. He struck with plague, with fire, with famine. But the child walked unburned. His presence disrupted the order. Coin lost value. Thrones cracked, names lost power. And the woman, she bore the blame. Whispers turned to cries. Witch deceiver, temptress of nations. She did not answer. She wrapped her son in silence and kept moving. But one night, she sat alone beside the fire and wept. Not for herself, but for those who could no longer see. She whispered, "Will they ever know?" And from the shadows a voice answered, "Only when the second veil is torn." She looked up. No one stood there, only flame. And a single moth hovering near its heat, refusing to flee. If this story has stirred something in you, like if her silence made you wonder, comment if his whisper echoed in your heart. And subscribe so you don't miss what unfolds when the veil thins. The night deepens, but the stars are watching. And somewhere in the shadow, the ancient enemy begins to take form, not as flame, but as voice. The whispers came before the shadow. They moved through the hills like smoke, thin, acrid, impossible to grasp. Some said they heard names in the wind. Others saw figures watching from the ridge faces, too smooth, too still. And the child, he grew silent, not from fear, but from focus. He would sit for hours watching water move, listening to trees speak in creaks and sways. One night he turned to her and said, "It has begun." She did not ask what. She had seen it in his eyes. The dragon no longer hid. It summoned. Not armies, but attention. Crowds once drawn to wonder now gathered for accusation. Scribes rewrote the story. Scrolls bore lies in golden ink. They claimed the child stole fire, that the woman had summoned plague, that they had twisted prophecy to feed their names. And the people, some believed, not because they hated, but because they feared being wrong. Fear not hatred is the dragon's true breath. And fear spread. Markets banned her name. Healers refused her coin. Walls were built with prayers that cursed her steps. Yet she walked still, through dust, through silence, through betrayal. And always with him. He no longer played, he no longer sang. But when he touched the sick, they rose. When he looked into blind eyes, they blinked at light. And with each miracle, the division grew. The remnant begged her to flee again. But she said, "No womb escapes its labor, and the world it is in travail. So they stayed and waited for the wind to speak again. The calling did not come with fire. It came with silence, a silence deeper than sleep, older than stone, thicker than fear. He woke in the middle of night, his eyes wide, his body still. She felt it before he spoke. He turned, voice steady as the stars above. I must go. Her breath caught not from surprise, but from sorrow. She had known this moment, felt it in her bones since his first breath. Still a mother hopes. Will you return? She whispered. He touched her face. I was never meant to stay. She wanted to weep, but instead she sang. A lullaby without melody. A prayer without plea. A farewell without goodbye. At dawn, he walked. Alone. No crowd, no remnant, no flame. Just sandals dust and the weight of worlds on shoulders still slight. And as he walked, the earth listened. Stones softened beneath his feet. Birds flew lower as if to see. He passed villages that had cursed him. They did not see him, not yet. For now he walked through the veil between hidden and revealed. And she remained, not abandoned, entrusted. She kept the cloth of stars, kept the memory of first fire, kept the silence that had always been her strength. And from her place among the cedars, she whispered, let the word walk and let the world choose. He arrived at the city's edge as unnoticed as dust. The gate stood tall, lined with gold and law. But he carried neither coin nor scroll, just a presence that unsettled air. The guards laughed. Who speaks for you? He answered only with eyes. Eyes that held a silence they could not name. They let him pass, not from permission, but because something in them forgot how to say no. Within the city walls sang with noise. Markets, arguments, worship veiled in wealth. He walked slowly, touched nothing, spoke to no one. Yet eyes turned, first a child, then a mother, then a merchant who forgot his profit. He sat at the steps of the great gate, the one where no teacher had stood in generations. And still he did not speak. Hours passed. Then a boy asked, who are you? And he answered, I am the remembering. The words spread faster than flame. Crowds gathered, not because of wonders, but because in his silence they heard truth. And truth long buried rose again. In the hills she watched, not with pride, with ache. For the word now walked alone. But the dragon was no longer hiding. The temple council summoned him, not with curiosity, with calculation. They had watched, measured, plotted. Now they moved. He entered their hall like wind, quiet every robe, unsettled by his presence. The high priest stood. We've heard your name, but not your doctrine. He did not answer. Another asked, who taught you these things? He looked to the floor, then up, eyes steady. I remember what was written before writing. They scoffed. Blasphemy. Mysticism. Madness. Yet none could look away. They pressed harder. What gives you the right? And he replied, I was not given. I was sent. A silence followed the kind that precedes tremors. The elder scribe rose. You heal, you draw crowds, you disturb order. He nodded. I disturb what is already crumbling. They grew restless. Are you the fulfillment one dared? He turned fully now, and with voice low as thunder in a tomb said, I am the flame beneath the veil, the word behind the veil, the breath that returns. The walls seemed to sigh. Candles flickered backward, and some fell to their knees not from belief but from knowing. Yet others burned with rage. He must be silenced, they hissed, but he had already stepped outside, and the crowd waited. Not for miracles, but for revelation. The veil was not torn by hands. It was torn by truth. Not shouted, but spoken. He stood in the courtyard surrounded by noise, but the noise could not touch him. A woman brought her child, eyes clouded with blindness. He touched her brow. No word, no flourish. And light came. The crowd gasped, but he did not smile, did not stay. He walked on. Another called out, "Are you the one who was promised?" He turned. "I am the voice that does not change." And again they followed. But some watched with clenched jaws, spies in robes, eyes that bore scrolls in inked fury. They reported back, "He threatens everything." So they gathered stones, not yet to throw, but to hold, to feel the weight of control. Meanwhile, he climbed the mountain, alone. There he prayed, not for escape, but for strength to finish the unveiling. Below they plotted. Above he prepared. And in between the world held its breath, for night was coming, and with it the final trial, the dragon's last breath, and the reason he was born. The night fell without stars. Even the moon veiled its gaze, and in that darkness he descended, not to flee, but to face. The city slept uneasily. Dreams twisted, oil lamps flickered and died. He entered the garden gate. Kneeling among olive roots, he whispered words only heaven could hear. "Not save me, but complete me." Above him a shadow moved. Not beast, not man, but the will to stop what cannot be stopped. He stood, faced the shadow. It spoke first. "You still carry it." He nodded. "It burns you." "Yes. You can drop it. No one will know." He answered, "I would know." A pause. Then fury. The dragon's voice, no longer hidden, rose. "Then die with it." He did not flinch. Only if death births light. The shadow vanished, but the echo lingered. At dawn, he walked into the square, alone, unarmed, and the stones rose to meet him. Not all thrown, some held, some hidden, but all heavy. The council appeared. So did the crowds. He was offered a final word. He chose silence. They took him, bound him, struck him, mocked him, and still he carried the flame. For it was never about escape. It was always about revelation. They raised him high, not on throne, on wood. Nails kissed flesh, blood crowned brow. The word hung silent. The crowd watched. Some jeered, some wept, some remembered. And among them she stood. No robe of stars, no veil of prophecy. Only a mother and her flame. She did not scream. She did not beg. She watched. And in watching she bore him again. The sky turned black, the earth cracked, the veil within the temple tore. From top to bottom, heaven to earth. And in that rift truth stepped out, not as thunder, as whisper. He looked down, met her gaze, and said, "It is born," then breathed and was still. Silence reigned, but not absence. The ground trembled, not in wrath, in recognition. And somewhere deep beneath forgotten stone, a flame refused to die. 3 days, and the stone moved, not rolled, not forced, moved. He walked again, not the same, never the same. He was still word, but now word fulfilled. And she waiting in the garden turned when he spoke her name. And in her tears he was born again, not to rule, to remain. If the silence moved you like, if the flame lit something in you, comment. And if you're still listening, subscribe. The story lives on. The dragon sleeps, but the fire watches. And the veil may tear again.